I was traveling to Portland for a job interview and needed somewhere cheap to stay for 3 nights. Most places were booked or way too expensive, but I found this cozy studio apartment for $60 a night. The photos looked decent enough. A small bed, tiny kitchen area, and what looked like a normal living space. The address led me to this older house in a residential neighborhood. Nothing too sketchy, just an ordinary 2-story place with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. The host had texted me earlier, saying the entrance was around back and down some stairs. That should have been my first red flag. I walked around the house and found these concrete steps leading down to what was clearly a basement. The door was this heavy metal thing that looked like it belonged on a storage unit, not an apartment. But whatever. I was tired from driving all day and just needed a place to crash. The studio was basically a converted basement with concrete walls painted white and carpet that felt damp under my feet. The ceiling was so low I could touch it without stretching. One tiny window near the ceiling let in almost no light, even during the day. The whole place smelled like mildew and something else I couldn't quite place. But the weirdest part was the layout. There were 2 rooms, the main area with the bed and kitchenette, and then this other room that was supposed to be a bathroom. Except the bathroom door didn't have a regular handle. It had one of those heavy-duty deadbolt locks that you'd see on a front door, and it locked from the outside. The first night was rough. Every little sound echoed off the concrete walls. Around 2 a.m., I heard what sounded like footsteps upstairs, which made sense since the host lived in the main house. But then I started hearing voices, not just talking, arguing. A man and woman going back and forth, getting louder and louder. Then it got quiet, really quiet. About an hour later, I heard the back door of the house open and close. Then footsteps on the stairs leading down to my door. Someone was standing right outside, not moving, not saying anything. I held my breath and listened. After maybe 10 minutes, the footsteps went back up. The second night, the same thing happened. Arguments upstairs, then someone coming down to stand outside my door. But this time I heard the person try the door handle. Just once, very slowly and quietly. When it didn't open, they stood there for what felt like forever before leaving. I barely slept. Something about this place felt all wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. On the 3rd morning, I was packing up to leave when I decided to really look at that bathroom door. The deadbolt was this heavy-duty thing, way more serious than you'd need for a bathroom. And when I looked closer, I could see scratches around the lock and door frame, like someone had been clawing at it. That's when I noticed something else. The carpet in the main room was newer than the carpet that went into the bathroom, like they'd replaced just part of it. And there were these dark stains on the concrete wall near the floor that the white paint didn't quite cover. I started thinking about how isolated this place was, how the door locked from the outside, how someone kept coming down to check on me in the middle of the night, how easy it would be to trap someone down here and no one would ever hear them. I grabbed my stuff and got out of there as fast as I could, but as I was loading my car, I saw the host watching me from an upstairs window. Middle-aged guy with this weird smile, just staring. When he saw me looking back, he didn't look away or wave or anything. He just kept staring with that same creepy smile. I drove straight to a hotel and didn't stop shaking until I was checked in somewhere with actual security and other people around. Later that day, I tried to leave a review warning other travelers, but my review got taken down for violating community guidelines. The thing that still bothers me most isn't even the creepy setup or the guy checking on me at night. It's that I looked up the address later, and according to city records, that basement isn't legally zoned as a rental unit. No permits, no inspections, nothing. Which means this guy was running an illegal operation, renting out what was basically a concrete box to vulnerable travelers who had nowhere else to go. I keep thinking about those scratches around that bathroom lock, about how the carpet was replaced, about how many other people might have stayed in that basement and what might have happened to them. Some of them probably never made it out to tell anyone about it. The worst part? The listing is still active. I checked last week and it has dozens of 5-star reviews from people talking about how quiet and private the place is. Either those reviews are fake, or people are so desperate for cheap places to stay that they're willing to ignore all the red flags I saw. I reported it to the platform, but nothing happened. That place is probably still operating, still trapping unsuspecting travelers in that concrete basement. And that guy is probably still making his midnight visits to check on his guests. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed one more night. If I'd been a little less paranoid, a little more trusting. Would I have ended up as just another missing person case that nobody bothered to investigate? I'll never know, and I'm glad I don't have to find out. I needed a place to stay in Austin for a work conference. Most hotels were crazy expensive, so I found this small apartment about 20 minutes from downtown. The host had tons of 5-star reviews, and the place looked clean in the photos. When I got there around 7 p.m., it was exactly like the pictures. Nice little one-bedroom with updated kitchen and a cozy living room. The host, Marcus, met me at the door with the key. He seemed friendly enough, probably mid-40s, talked about how he'd been hosting for 3 years and loved meeting new people. But then he said something that stuck with me. "I keep a spare key just in case guests lock themselves out. Don't worry though, I always knock first." He laughed when he said it, but something about the way he looked at me made me uncomfortable. The first night was fine. I went to bed around 11 p.m. and slept pretty well. But the second night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to what sounded like footsteps in the living room. Really soft, like someone was trying not to make noise. I stayed in bed and listened. The footsteps moved slowly across the room, then stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could see the shadow of feet under the door. Someone was standing there, not moving, for what felt like forever. Then I heard the front door open and close quietly. I waited about 10 minutes before getting up to check. The deadbolt was still locked from the inside, which meant whoever was in there had a key. The next morning, I texted Marcus asking if he'd come by the night before. He said no, but maybe I'd heard the upstairs neighbors. The thing is, it was a single-story building. That day, while I was at the conference, I couldn't stop thinking about it. When I got back to the apartment around 6 p.m., I noticed a few things that seemed off. My laptop bag was in a slightly different spot on the kitchen counter. The bathroom door was open when I was pretty sure I'd left it closed. Small stuff that could have been nothing, but it felt wrong. I decided to test something. Before leaving for dinner, I put a piece of tape on the inside of the front door frame, way up high where you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. If someone came in while I was gone, the tape would fall. When I got back around 10 p.m., the tape was on the floor. My heart started racing. Someone had definitely been in the apartment while I was out. I started looking around more carefully and found other signs. The couch cushions were arranged differently. One of my shirts was hanging backwards in the closet. Little things that showed someone had been going through my stuff. I called Marcus right away. He answered on the first ring, which was weird for 10:30 at night. When I told him someone had been in the apartment, he got defensive real quick. "That's impossible. I'm the only one with a spare key and I haven't been over there." "Well, someone was here," I said. "They moved my things around." "Maybe you just forgot how you left things. It happens when you're tired from traveling." But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew about that tape. I didn't sleep at all that third night. Every little sound made me jump. Around 1 a.m., I heard a car door close outside, then footsteps on the walkway leading to the apartment. They stopped right at the front door. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. Marcus was standing at the door with keys in his hand. He wasn't knocking or anything, just standing there like he was deciding what to do. After about 5 minutes, he walked back to his car and drove away. But he came back an hour later and did the same thing. Just stood at the door with his keys, then left. The next morning was my last day. I packed up early and decided to confront him when he came to get the key back. But when I texted him that I was ready to check out, he said to just leave the key on the kitchen counter and lock the door behind me. That's when I realized he didn't want to face me. He knew I knew what he'd been doing. Before I left, I decided to look around the apartment one more time. That's when I found something that made my blood run cold. Behind the bedroom door, there was a small hole in the wall about eye level. It was covered by a tiny piece of removable drywall that you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. I pulled it out and there was a clear view into the bedroom. You could see the entire bed from that angle. I took pictures of everything and got out of there as fast as I could. But as I was loading my car, I saw Marcus's car parked down the street. He was just sitting there watching me leave. I reported everything to the platform with photos of the peephole and screenshots of our messages. They took the listing down within 24 hours and refunded my money. But I kept thinking about all those 5-star reviews. Were they fake? Or had other guests just never figured out what was happening? The scariest part was realizing how long this had probably been going on. That peephole wasn't something he drilled the night before. It had been there for a while, which meant he'd been watching other guests sleep for who knows how long. I looked up his other properties, and he had 2 more listings in different parts of Austin. I reported those too, but I have no idea if they ever got taken down. For all I know, he's still out there renting places to unsuspecting travelers and using his spare key to let himself in whenever he wants. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't put up that tape, if I'd just brushed off those weird feelings and assumed I was being paranoid. How many nights would he have stood outside my bedroom door? How many times would he have watched me sleep through that hole in the wall? I'll never book another place where the host has easy access. Some people shouldn't be trusted with keys to the place where you're supposed to feel safe. I was traveling to Denver for my cousin's wedding and booked this studio apartment downtown. The host seemed normal enough. Middle-aged woman named Carol with good reviews. The place was cheap and looked clean in the photos. When I got there Friday afternoon, Carol met me at the door with the keys. She seemed really nice, asking about my trip and telling me about good restaurants nearby. But then she said something weird. "Just so you know, I put you down as my emergency contact with the building management. Hope that's okay. It's just in case something happens to me while you're staying here." I thought that was strange, but she laughed it off like it was no big deal. "I live alone and don't have much family around. You seem trustworthy." The apartment was exactly like the photos. Small but clean, with a Murphy bed and tiny kitchen. Everything seemed fine that first night. I went to the wedding rehearsal dinner and came back around 11 p.m. to get some sleep. But around 2 a.m., my phone started ringing. Unknown local number. I let it go to voicemail, but then it rang again and again. Finally, I answered, thinking maybe it was an emergency. It was a man's voice, sounding panicked. "Is this the emergency contact for Carol Morrison in apartment 4B? "I guess. I'm staying in her place. What's wrong?" "We've been getting noise complaints all night. Loud banging and what sounds like screaming coming from her unit. But when we knock, nobody answers. Can you come check on her?" My heart sank. I was in Carol's apartment, 4B. There was no other unit. The building manager thought Carol lived here with me as her emergency contact, but Carol lived somewhere else entirely. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I started to say, but the line went dead. A few minutes later, there was loud knocking on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw a security guard with a flashlight. "Building security. We need to do a wellness check." I opened the door and tried to explain that I was just renting the place, but the guard looked confused. "Ma'am, our records show Carol Morrison lives here with you, listed as her emergency contact. We've had multiple noise complaints tonight about shouting and banging." "I've been asleep. I didn't hear anything." He looked at me like I was lying. "The neighbors say it's been going on for hours. Really loud stuff. You didn't hear any of that?" I let him look around the small studio. There was nowhere to hide, no other rooms, nothing. But he kept checking like he expected to find Carol's body or something. "This is really weird," he said. "She filled out the paperwork just yesterday, saying she lived here with you as her contact, but clearly nobody else is here." After he left, I couldn't sleep. Why would Carol list me as her emergency contact and pretend she lived in the apartment I was renting? It made no sense. The next morning, I tried calling Carol to ask about it, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking her to call me back about the building management situation. She never called back. That afternoon before the wedding, I went down to the building office to try to clear things up. The property manager showed me the paperwork Carol had filled out the day before I arrived. Sure enough, she'd listed the apartment as her primary residence and put my name and phone number as her emergency contact. "This is really strange," the manager said. "She's been renting this place out to guests for 2 years, but yesterday she suddenly changed all her information to make it look like she lives here." "Why would she do that?" "No idea. But I'll tell you what's really weird. We've never had noise complaints about this unit before. But last night, 3 different neighbors called about loud screaming and banging. And now nobody can reach Carol." I felt sick to my stomach. Something was really wrong here. The property manager agreed to change the emergency contact info and remove Carol's name as a resident, but he said he was going to follow up with her about the false information. At the wedding that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. When I got back to the apartment around midnight, there was a note slipped under my door. "Thanks for covering for me. Had to disappear for a while. Don't worry about the noise complaints. That was just part of the plan. You were perfect. C." I grabbed my stuff and got out of there immediately. Drove straight to a hotel and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I found out Carol had deleted her Airbnb account. Just vanished completely. The property manager said she'd been evicted from her actual apartment 3 months ago for not paying rent. I started putting the pieces together. Carol had been using my reservation as cover for something. She made me her fake emergency contact, so when whatever she was planning went down, the building would call me instead of the police or her real family. Those noise complaints weren't random. She'd been in that apartment doing something that made the neighbors think someone was being hurt. And then she disappeared, leaving me holding the bag as her supposed roommate and emergency contact. I never found out what really happened that night, but I keep thinking about that note. That was just part of the plan. What plan? What was she doing that made it sound like someone was screaming for help? The scariest part is realizing how easy it was for her to use me as an alibi. I was just a random traveler looking for a cheap place to stay, and somehow I became part of whatever Carol was running from. I reported everything to the police, but they said without more evidence, there wasn't much they could do. Carol was gone, and I was left wondering if I'd unknowingly helped someone cover up something terrible. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed that second night. Would there have been more noise complaints? Would I have ended up more involved in whatever Carol was really up to? I'll never know, and honestly, I don't want to find out.